Good evening and welcome again to 1010, your top 10 news in 10 minutes. I'm Andy Hong. Happy belated New Year to all of you for what I believe is the year of the sheep or ram or goat or whatever you prefer to call it, as the difference is regional. I hope you all had a chance to spend the day with friends and family to have some fun and enjoy the little things, being reminded that no matter what, we all still have people who care around us. And the financial leaders of the European Union have also been preparing to gather for the third time in Brussels, Belgium, to discuss the economic crisis in Greece. According to figures released by the European Central Bank, Greece's bank deposits have been steadily declining, especially during the past 2 years, nearly 100 billion euro since early 2012. There is an existing economic bailout deal set to expire next month, but Germany rejected a Greek proposal for a 6-month extension on an alternate loan program. Greece had always sought to shed itself of the bailout's burdensome austerity measures, which other Eurozone nations see as more sustainable than continued loaning. As a result, there's a high risk that Greece could completely go dry on money before a new deal comes into effect. And when that happens, the feces will really hit the fan for the European economy. Any agreements in these negotiations must be unanimous, and we all saw how that went down back when the United States had the Articles of Confederation. In other words, it is not going to look pretty. While Western Europe staggers under financial strains, Eastern Europe is collapsing before our very eyes. A ceasefire agreement in Ukraine, known as the Minsk Protocol, never went into effect on Sunday. Fighting raged on as always, and government forces have been pushed out of the shattered town of Debaltseve. Fortunately, the separatists were decent enough to provide the tired residents with humanitarian aid, residents who are embittered and resentful for the hardships that they had had to endure. And many of us will never know of, mostly because the separatists refused to allow international monitors into the town during much of the conflict, much to the dismay of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Meanwhile, NATO fighter aircraft are on constant alert for intruding Russian bombers. The United States Air Force is to redeploy A-10 ground attack aircraft to the forward air bases in Germany, and Russian President Vladimir Putin has imprisoned another one of his dissenters for attempting to hold a public demonstration against the president. Donetsk, Mariupol, Luhansk, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, now Debaltseve. Let us not have our future generations remember these names as we now painfully remember Manchuria, Rhineland, Guernica, Sudetenland, Nanjing, and Austria. The war against ISIS in the Middle East has spread to North Africa as Egypt began its own bombing campaign against the terrorist group after a video surfaced showing the execution of 21 Egyptian Christians in Libya. ISIS has been in North Africa for months now, but this is the first real military move to dislodge them from the destabilized nation of Libya. In Iraq, strategists are planning a new offensive on the major city of Mosul, which was captured last year. The operation, which will take place in April or May, will involve a joint Iraqi-Kurdish force of almost 25,000 strong. Airstrikes have been a major part of the recent counteroffensive against ISIS, and I think many of us are underestimating the sheer intensity of the air campaign over Iraq and Syria. Operation Inherent Resolve, as it is called, has seen over 1,200 strikes over Iraq and over 930 in Syria. We cannot, however, forget the indiscriminate brutality so common in bombing campaigns, as demonstrated by a Nigerian airstrike against the terrorist group Boko Haram. 2 days ago, a military aircraft accidentally dropped a bomb on a funeral gathering and killed 37 innocent mourners. North and Central Africa, too, seems to be now caught in the recent storm of violence. Violent terror attacks are not reserved for the Middle East and Africa. We've seen deadly attacks in Australia and France as well. Now another deadly terror-inspired shooting in Copenhagen, Denmark, shows a disturbing trend of violence in the name of religion, especially in Europe. The Danish gunman who had allegedly sworn allegiance to ISIS, Omar Abdulhamid al-Hussein, opened fire on a free speech forum led by controversial Swedish cartoonist Lars Vilks, who is on countless terrorist hit lists for depicting the Prophet Muhammad, an act forbidden by Islamic law. After firing shots into the cafe where the forum was being held, the shooter turned his attention to some people outside a synagogue and then to the police. The gunman was killed during the ensuing shootout, but not before taking the lives of 2 innocent people. Responding to all of the violence related to terrorists who use Islam as an excuse for their disgusting actions, President Obama spoke before a global summit to urge political and religious leaders to stop terrorism at its roots. He pushed for politicians to address grievances that the terrorists exploit and for Muslim clerics to preach against using violence in the name of Islam. By doing so, the terrorists would not be able to feed off the citizens' unhappiness and would not be able to hire young men and women by implanting a false idea of Islamic jihad. Now, the question is, will the world just listen or take action? President Obama is, of course, very well known for his affordable healthcare plan, otherwise more popularly known as Obamacare. Speaking of healthcare, there was a frightening breach in medical safety when the CRE superbug bacteria, a type of bacteria that is resistant to most known antibiotics, killed 2 and infected 7 others at the UCLA Medical Center. Almost 180 people are suspected to have been exposed to the bacteria, which has a 40 to 50% mortality rate, as if the measles outbreak in California wasn't enough. But don't worry, the outbreak, they say, will most likely be promptly contained. In the town of Boomer, West Virginia, however, they have no time to worry about the superbug virus spreading to their doorsteps. A freight train filled with crude oil derailed and exploded on Monday, and the resulting oil spill sparked fears of water contamination in the area. Smoke could be seen from miles away, even on Tuesday, when most of the fire had subsided. This is another major train accident in a series of derailments, automobile collisions, and explosions over the past few years. It's about time American infrastructure really steps up its game. And there's not much respite for much of the states east of the Rockies as Arctic air settled in once again and sent temperatures plummeting to 20 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit below normal February levels. From Maine to Florida, millions of people face sub-freezing temperatures, power outages, and even more snow. There have even been reported deaths due to the conditions. And despite the extreme cold, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration released a report showing how this past January of 2015 has been the second warmest on record, second only to the January of 2007. Sea ice has been also melting at an alarming rate, 1% per decade. As if to demonstrate the effects of increased water temperatures leading to larger and more frequent storms, Australia faced 2 large cyclones in Queensland and the Northern Territory, classified as Category 5 and 4 respectively. Strong winds and high tides caused power outages, but fortunately there have been no reported injuries and the storms have subsided since then. But the American West Coast is not to benefit from any of the much needed moisture. Climatologists predict another dry year. In Israel, archaeologists struck gold, literally. Divers exploring the ancient harbor of Caesarea found 2,000 millennium-old gold coins, which makes it the largest collection of ancient gold coins ever found in Israel. Analysts predict with quite a degree of certainty that most of the coins are from the Shiite Fatimid Caliphate. Marine archaeologists are studying the site as we speak, and hopefully this finding leads to new discoveries. At the same time, humanity is going yet further to uncharted frontiers. After traveling more than 3 billion miles since 2006, the probe New Horizons has beamed back new images of Nixon Hydra, 2 of Pluto's many moons. New Horizons is flying 1 million miles per day, and we will be getting our first crystal clear images on Pluto within months. NASA has announced that we should expect surprises, as the clearest picture of Pluto we have so far is a brownish-white jumble of pixels taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. But this time around, we have a probe that can make out features the size of buildings on the surface of the dwarf planet. That's right, get hyped. Good job, Ben. That's the spirit. And that was the 1010 news for this week. I'm Andy Hong. Make sure to like us on Facebook and YouTube. And we'll be back next week with more of your top 10 news in 10 minutes. Stay educated.